It was a Tuesday afternoon in October 1963 when a 19-year-old man walked into Morrison's Music and Pawn on 7th Street in Los Angeles, carrying a guitar case that smelled like years of cigarette smoke and storage. The sun came in low through dirty windows. The shop was narrow and dim. Brass instruments hung from the ceiling like forgotten ornaments. A radio hummed softly somewhere in the back, playing something nobody was listening to. The floor creaked under his weight. Arthur Morrison looked up from a green ledger, pen still in hand. He had thick glasses, a gray mustache, and the kind of face that had stopped reacting to sad stories a long time ago. "Help you?" Morrison said. The young man set the case on the counter. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the wood to steady them. "I need to sell this," he said. Morrison glanced at the case, then back at the young man. "What is it?" "A guitar." "I can see that." Morrison set his pen down. "What kind?" "What Martin D18 1948. That got his attention. Morrison leaned forward, unlatched the brass clasps, and opened the case. The guitar lay inside, honey-colored wood, worn smooth in places where someone's hand had rested for years. There was a small scratch near the sound hole, just below the strings. The young man had put it there when he was 7. He'd been playing with a toy car on the floor and it slipped out of his hand. He thought he'd ruined it. His father picked him up that day, sat him on his knee, and ran his finger along the scratch. "See that?" his father had said. "That's you. That's the day you were here. Now every time I play, I'll remember." He never fixed it. Morrison lifted the guitar carefully. He turned it over in his hands, checked the neck, the bridge, the tuning pegs. He plucked one of the strings. The sound filled the small room clear and full. "It's in decent shape," Morrison said. "Needs new strings somewhere on the frets." "It plays fine," the young man said. "I'm sure it does." Morrison set the guitar back in the case and looked at him. "What are you asking, $100? Morrison smiled. Not unkind, just automatic. "Kid, I can't give you 100. It's worth more than that. Maybe." Morrison closed the case halfway. "But I have to sell it, and I have overhead. Best I can do is 60. The young man's face changed. Something dropped behind his eyes. $60 wasn't enough. The rent was $110. His mother's medicine was another $40. They were already 2 weeks late. The landlord had called 3 times. The last time, he said if they didn't pay by Thursday, they were out. His sister was 16. She'd been working double shifts at a diner on Sunset Boulevard for the past month, coming home at midnight smelling like grease and coffee, too tired to even take off her shoes. The young man had told her he would figure it out, but he hadn't figured it out, and now he was here. 75. The young man said. Morrison sighed and leaned back against the wall. "Look, I'm running a business. I got rent too. I got inventory I can't move. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's selling something their grandfather left them or their dad gave them. I hear it 10 times a week. It doesn't change the numbers. I'm not lying to you," the young man said. "I didn't say you were. My father played this guitar every night for 15 years, the young man said. His voice was steady, but barely. "He taught me on it. He taught my sister. He died in March. This is the only thing I have left that still sounds like him." He hadn't meant to say all that, but it came out anyway. Morrison didn't say anything for a moment. Then he shook his head. 65, he said. "That's as high as I go." The young man stared at the guitar. 65 meant they'd still be short. It meant his sister would keep working nights. It meant he'd have to find something else to sell. And there was nothing else. He opened his mouth to say yes. "How much did you say it was worth?" The voice came from the back of the shop. The young man turned. A man stood near a rack of old trumpets, hands in the pockets of a dark wool overcoat. He looked about 40, clean-shaven, hair combed back smooth. He didn't look like someone who spent Tuesday afternoons in pawn shops. "I'm sorry," the young man said. The stranger walked toward the counter, slow and even, like he had all the time in the world. "The guitar," the man said. "You said it's worth more than 100. "It is? Let me see it." But Morrison shot him a glance. "Sir, we're in the middle of—" "I'd like to see it," the man said again. His voice was calm, polite, but it wasn't a request. Morrison hesitated, then stepped aside. The man came up to the counter and looked down at the guitar. He didn't touch it right away, just stood there, looking at it the way someone looks at something they recognize but haven't seen in a long time. Then he reached down and lifted it out of the case. He held it with both hands, left on the neck, right arm cradling the body like someone would hold a child. He didn't sit down, just stood there, adjusting his grip, his thumb running along the edge of the sound hole. He stopped at the scratch. "This is a D18, the man said quietly. "Yes, sir," the young man said. 1948. "That's right." But the stranger positioned his fingers on the frets and played a chord. The sound rolled through the shop like water through a canyon. Clean, full, resonant. He played another chord, then a short melody, just a few bars, nothing complicated. But the way he played it, anyone could tell he understood what he was holding. When he stopped, the silence felt heavier. For a moment, the young man couldn't breathe. The sound had filled the room the same way it used to fill the living room back home. The same warmth, the same weight. He hadn't heard that sound in 8 months, not since the night his father died. And now it was here again, in this narrow shop on 7th Street, played by a stranger's hands. It was like his father was standing in the corner again, like the years had folded back on themselves. The young man looked down at the counter and tried to steady himself, but the sound was still echoing in his chest. "Your father played this?" the stranger asked. The young man nodded. He didn't trust his voice yet. "What did he play?" "Standards, mostly," the young man said quietly. "Some Hank Williams. He liked Sinatra. He used to play one for my baby after we went to bed. I could hear it through the wall." The man smiled, small, like he'd heard that song the same way once. "Your father had good taste?" "Oh, Wes, sir." But the stranger set the guitar back in the case, but he didn't close it. He looked at Morrison. "How much were you offering him?" "65, Morrison said, a little defensive now. The man nodded slowly. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a leather wallet. He counted out 5 $20 bills, crisp and new, and laid them on the counter. "Here's 100, he said. The young man stared at the money. "Sir, I can't. Take it. I don't understand." "You're not taking anything from me," the stranger said. "You're selling the guitar. That's what you came here to do. I'm paying you what it's worth. But, take the money," the man said again, firmer this time. "Pay your rent. Get your mother what she needs." At the young man's throat went tight. The stranger knew. He didn't know how. Maybe it was in his voice. Maybe it was the way he was standing there, holding onto the counter like it was the only thing keeping him upright. But the stranger knew. Morrison was staring at both of them now, confused. "Sir, if you're buying it, I'll need to process." "I'm not buying it," the man said. He pushed the bills toward the young man. "I'm paying him what it's worth, and he's keeping the guitar." A Morrison blinked. "That's not how this works." "It is today." Nobody moved. The young man looked down at the $100. He looked at the guitar. He looked at this stranger he'd never seen before in his life, standing there in his wool coat with his hands back in his pockets like he'd just done the most ordinary thing in the world. "What?" the young man asked. The stranger met his eyes, and for the first time, the young man saw something in the man's face that wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was recognition. "Because somebody did it for me once," the stranger said. He didn't explain, didn't offer details, just said it like it was a fact no one argues with. Then he looked at the guitar one more time. "My father died when I was 17, the man said quietly. "To Benville, Ohio, steel town. He worked the mill until his lungs gave out. Came home every night covered in black dust, coughing into a rag he kept in his back pocket. By the time I was 16, that rag was coming up red." His voice stayed even, but there was weight underneath it. "When he died, we couldn't afford the funeral. My mother was working 2 jobs, and it still wasn't enough. I had his wristwatch, a Beluga, nothing fancy, but he wore it every day for 23 years. You could still see the outline of it on his wrist after they took him, like the watch had protected that one piece of him from everything else." He paused. "I went to a jeweler on 4th Street to sell it. Guy looked at it for maybe 10 seconds and offered me $12. I knew it was worth more, but I also knew I didn't have a choice." The stranger reached into his coat and pulled out a silver wristwatch, old. The band was worn but polished. "There was a man in that shop," he continued, "older. Didn't say much, but he was watching. And when I was about to take the $12, he stopped me, put his hand on my shoulder and asked if that watch meant something to me. I told him it was my father's. He nodded. Then he paid for the funeral himself. $240. Told me to keep the watch." The stranger looked at the young man. "I asked him why. He said somebody did it for him once, and that one day I'd see someone else in the same spot, and I'd know what to do." He gestured toward the guitar. "This is me knowing." The young man couldn't speak. His hands were shaking again, but for a different reason now. "Keep the guitar," the stranger said. "Play it, teach someone else. Let it keep sounding like him." He turned toward the door. "Wait," the young man said. "What's your name?" The stranger stopped, one hand on the doorframe. He glanced back over his shoulder and smiled. "Dion," he said, and then he was gone. The young man stood there holding $100 in one hand and his father's guitar in the other. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry or just sit down on the floor. Morrison didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there behind the counter, staring at the space where the stranger had been. His hands were flat on the counter like he needed something solid to hold on to. Then Morrison took off his glasses. "Go home," he said quietly. "What?" "Go home. Take care of your mother." But the young man looked at him. Morrison's face had changed. The indifference was gone. In its place was something that looked like shame. "I'm sorry," Morrison said. "About the 65 I should." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I should have been better." But the young man didn't know what to say. "I have a son," Morrison said after a moment. "He's 22, lives in San Diego now. We don't talk." He set his glasses down on the counter. 3 years ago, he needed money. His car broke down. He was going to lose his job if he couldn't get it fixed. He called me and asked for $200. I had it. I could have given it to him without even thinking about it. Morrison's voice cracked. But I didn't. I told him I'd loan it to him, made him sign a paper, charged him interest. My own son. And when he couldn't pay me back on time, I called him every week to remind him, made him feel like he owed me more than money. Morrison looked up at the young man. He paid me back. Every cent. And then he stopped calling. For a moment, Morrison just stood there, staring at the phone on the wall behind the counter. It was an old rotary, black and heavy, the kind that used to hang in every kitchen in America. He'd installed it himself when he opened the shop 11 years ago. He hadn't heard his son's voice come through that phone in 2 years. He thought about the last conversation they'd had. It was short, businesslike. His son had said he was sending the final payment that week, and Morrison had said good, they were square then. Square, like his son was a customer. Like the money was the only thing that mattered. Morrison had told himself he was teaching his son responsibility, teaching him that nothing in life was free. But standing there now, watching a stranger give $100 to a kid he'd never met and tell him to keep the guitar, Morrison realized what he'd actually done. He'd made his son feel small. He'd made him feel like love had a price. And when his son finally paid that price, he'd walked away. Morrison opened a drawer under the counter and pulled out a blank piece of paper and an envelope. "I'm writing to him tonight," Morrison said. "I'm going to tell him the debt's forgiven. I'm going to tell him I'm sorry. I don't know if he'll respond, but I have to try." The young man nodded. "Thank you for coming in," Morrison said. "For what?" "For reminding me what I forgot." The young man picked up the case and walked out. The sun was lower now. The air smelled like exhaust and ocean salt. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time, holding the case in one hand and the $100 in the other. Then he went home. It wasn't until 2 days later that he realized who the stranger was. He was walking past the Sands Hotel and saw a poster in the window. A man in a tuxedo leaning against a microphone, smiling that same small smile. Dan Martin, one of the most famous singers in the country, had just walked into a pawn shop, paid his rent, and told him to keep his father's guitar. And he hadn't even recognized him. The young man kept that $100 in an envelope for 3 days before he spent it. Not because he didn't need it, but because every time he looked at it, he thought about his father. He thought about Dan Martin standing in that shop, holding a guitar he didn't need to hold, playing a song he didn't need to play. He thought about what kindness looks like when it doesn't ask for anything back. The rent got paid. His mother got her medicine. His sister went back to school 6 months later, and he kept the guitar. He played it every night, just like his father had. At first, he didn't know what he was playing. He just played. But over time, he got better. He started teaching kids in the neighborhood, $5 a lesson. Sometimes nothing if their parents couldn't afford it. One of those kids was a boy named Michael. He was 14 when he started, quiet, serious. His father had died in a factory accident the year before. His mother worked 2 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet. The young man, now older, now a teacher, taught him for free. 2 years later, Michael came to his apartment and stood in the doorway looking like he was about to break. "I need to sell my father's saxophone," Michael said. The teacher knew that saxophone. He'd seen Michael carry it to every lesson. He'd heard him play it like it was the only thing in the world that still made sense. "Why?" the teacher asked. We're 3 months behind on rent. If we don't pay by Friday, we're out. The teacher thought about Dean Martin. He thought about his father's guitar sitting in the corner of his living room, still smelling like old wood and smoke. And he told Michael the same thing Dean had told him. You're keeping it. I'll cover the rent. Michael stared at him. I can't. You're not taking anything from me. I'm doing this because someone did it for me once. I don't understand. You will, the teacher said. One day you'll see someone in the same spot, and you'll know what to do. Michael's mother cried when he told her. She tried to refuse. He wouldn't let her. 2 months later, Michael played his father's saxophone at a school concert. His mother sat in the front row, and when he finished, she stood up and clapped until her hands turned red. After the concert, she came up to him. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You don't have to. He talks about you all the time. Says you're the only reason he didn't give up. That's not me, the teacher said. That's his father. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said something he never forgot. You gave him permission to remember. By years passed, the teacher got married, had 2 daughters, taught music at a community center in Pasadena. The guitar went everywhere with him. His daughters learned to play on it. His oldest played it at her high school graduation. His youngest played it at his wife's funeral in 1987. He never saw Don Martin again. He looked for him once in 1974 when Dean performed at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. He bought a ticket and sat in the balcony and watched him sing. Dean was older, slower, but his voice still had that warmth. The teacher wanted to go backstage, to tell him what his kindness had done, how it had moved through the world in ways he'd never see. But he didn't, because he realized Dean didn't do it to be thanked. He did it because someone had done it for him, and that was enough. In 1995, a man in his 30s walked into the teacher's class at the community center. He was carrying a guitar case and looked nervous. Are you Mr. Castellano? The man asked. I am. I'm Michael's son. David? The teacher stared at him. Your father. He told me to come see you. He said you were the one who taught him what mattered. Where is he now? Arizona. He teaches music at a school for kids with disabilities. Been doing it for 20 years. The teacher felt something warm move through his chest. He wanted me to tell you something. David said, 32 years ago, you paid his rent so he could keep his father's saxophone. And because of that, he spent his whole life teaching kids who don't have anything that they still have something worth keeping. David opened his guitar case. Inside was a beat-up acoustic, scratched and worn, held together with electrical tape. My dad gave his father's saxophone to a kid who needed it more than I did, David said. So now I'm here to learn on this. The teacher looked at that guitar. Then he looked at David, and he understood. He taught him for 6 months. When David's wedding came, he played at the reception, not perfectly, but honestly. And Michael sat in the front row and cried. After the wedding, Michael came up to his old teacher. I never thanked you, Michael said. You didn't have to. Wes, I did. Michael put his hand on his shoulder. You changed my life. And because you did, I got to change other people's. That wasn't me, the teacher said. That was you. No, Michael said. It started with you. And before you, it started with someone else. That's the whole point, isn't it? The teacher thought about Dean Martin standing in that pawn shop in 1963. Yes, he said, that's the whole point. 3 weeks later, Arthur Morrison died. Heart attack. He was 78. The funeral was small. The teacher went because he felt he should. There were maybe 15 people there. One of them was a young man who looked exactly like Morrison, his son. After the service, the teacher introduced himself. "I met your father once," he said. "Long time ago." "Oh, what was he like?" the son asked. The teacher said. The teacher's son nodded. "He wrote to me," the son said quietly. "3 years ago, out of nowhere, said he forgave a debt, said he was sorry." "Did you write back?" "Not at first. I was still angry. But then I realized he didn't write it because he expected anything. He wrote it because he needed to." The son looked at him. "We started talking again after that. Slowly. It wasn't perfect, but it was something." "I'm glad," the teacher said. "He told me a story once," the son continued, "about a kid who tried to sell a guitar, and about a man who paid for it and told the kid to keep it. He said that moment changed him." The son smiled. "I don't know if it was true, but it mattered to him." The teacher didn't tell him he was the kid. He just shook his hand and walked away. The decades moved slowly, the way they do when people stop counting them. The teacher became an old man. His daughters grew up, moved away, started families of their own. The community center where he taught closed and reopened twice. The neighborhood changed. The city changed. But the guitar stayed the same. It sat in the corner of his living room, in the same spot where it had always been. The wood was darker now, polished by years of hands. The scratch near the sound hole was still there. The strings had been replaced 100 times, but the body was the same. He played it less often as the years went on. His fingers weren't as nimble. His hearing wasn't as sharp. But every now and then, late at night, he'd pick it up and play something slow, something his father used to play. And every time he did, he thought about Dean Martin. He never saw him again, never spoke to him, never wrote to him. But the man's presence had never left. It lived in the guitar. It lived in the lessons he taught. It lived in the way he looked at people who were trying to hold on to something they couldn't afford to lose. Dean Martin had walked into that pawn shop for 30 seconds and changed the shape of a life, and he'd never known it. By the time the teacher turned 81, the guitar had outlived almost everyone who'd ever touched it. His father, his wife, Dean Martin himself, who died in 1995. But the guitar was still there. The teacher was 81 years old when his oldest granddaughter came to visit. She was 16. He called her into the living room and pointed to the guitar in the corner. "Come here," he said. She walked over. "This belonged to your great-grandfather," he told her. "He played it every night, and everyone who's held it since has kept it alive." "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. "Because I'm giving it to you." She looked at him surprised. "Why?" "Because it's not mine to keep anymore. It's yours to carry forward." She held it carefully, the way people hold things they know are valuable but don't yet understand why. "What if I mess it up?" she asked. "You won't," he said, "because you'll remember what it means, Don." "What does it mean?" "It means someone believed you were worth helping. And one day you'll see someone who needs the same thing, and you'll know what to do." She nodded, and he saw in her face the same thing he'd seen in Dean Martin's face 62 years ago. Recognition of him? Not of the guitar, but of what comes next. Some things aren't meant to be sold. They're meant to be kept, played, passed down. Not because of what they're worth, but because of who they used to belong to. If someone tried to make you sell the last thing your father left behind, what would you do? Would you let it go, Or would you find another way? Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there right now. Or maybe you were the one who helped someone keep what mattered. If this story reminded you of something or someone, leave it in the comments. And if you think someone out there needs to hear this, someone who's trying to hold on to something they can't afford to lose, share it with them. Sometimes a story finds the person who needs it most.